Good evening. It's June the 12th. This evening we have 3 public hearings. First, we'll have a public hearing for ordinance number 1594, adopting the annual budget for a tax rate for the fiscal year of July the 1st, 23 through June the 30th of 24, for passage on the second of 3 readings. Anyone that would care to speak on that public hearing? Seeing none, we'll close that public hearing and move on to the second public hearing. Second public hearing is an ordinance number 1595, amending Title 14 of the Zoning and Land Use Control. That's Chapter 2, zoning ordinance, and that's Section 202 for the Board of Zoning and Appeals, by deleting it in its entirety and substituting a new Section 202, Board of Appeals, for passage on the second and final reading. Anyone care to speak on that public hearing? Not, we will close that public hearing and move on to the third ordinance that we're considering tonight. It's an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance of the City of Tullahoma, Tennessee, which is ordinance number 1392, by amending Article number 4, that's specific district regulations, Section 405 for microbrewery use in restricted manufacturing and warehousing, I-1, that's zoning district, and that's for passage on the first of 2 readings. Anyone care to speak on that public hearing? If not, we'll close the public hearing and move right into the regular agenda. So call to order the Board of Mayor and Alderman for June the 12th. And ask the Reverend Marty Nutter to bring the invocation and lead us then in the pledge to the allegiance. Please stand. Reverend Nutter.
Thank you, Mayor. I wish our church meetings were as quick as those 3 meetings we just already had. Let us bow our heads in prayer. Oh, Lord God, we ask that you lead us and give us wisdom and discernment in every decision that we make this evening. Where we are in error, reform us. Where we are in need, supply us. Where we are right, strengthen and confirm us. And where we are torn apart, heal our divisions. Through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Reverend Nutter.
Caught me off guard.
That's the city recorder do the roll call.
Allmacher.
Here.
Berry.
Here.
Glick.
Here.
Noes.
Here.
Mann.
Here.
Mathis.
Here.
Wilson.
Present.
And we have 7 present, so at this time there we have no commendations or certificates tonight. We've got to put our full agenda, but we'll move right into comments from citizens. We have several citizens who have signed in to speak, so I'll ask the recorder to call you up one at a time. When you come up, please state your name and address.
Jonathan Carroll.
Good evening, Board. My name is Jonathan Carroll, 117 Hamilton Lane, Tullahoma, Tennessee. I wanted to come with some good news tonight. Some of you may have seen this, some of you may have not. But our 2006 Camp Forest Football Club girls team, which is the under 17 age group, just won about 2 weeks ago the Division II state championship up in Murfreesboro. They leave tomorrow to Greenville, South Carolina to represent the state of Tennessee in the regional tournament. So that's huge news for that team. Coach Katie Reed from Motlow, as well as Carlos Amando, has been a great help for that group. Also want to make you aware that about 3 weeks ago we had 35 recreational kids that got their first taste of tournament experience. We normally don't do that with our rec kids, but we sent them up to Murfreesboro to play in what they call the Friendship Cup. It's a recreational tournament. A lot of these kids never have played any more than what we do locally. A lot of them had a great time. Our U10 team went undefeated in that tournament, so that's huge. The other part of that's important is that is a traveling tournament that's done biannually through the State Soccer Association. I've been in communication with the state board about hosting that tournament in Tullahoma. The one thing that's preventing that is our bathrooms. They don't want 30 teams from across the state coming to use porta potties. So I come to you tonight again asking for where our bathrooms are. That ARPA funding was approved in May of 2022. I know we had an issue with the first solution that was presented by engineering, but I've heard very little since then. I reached out to the interim city administrator on February 28th, asking for who is the point of contact. Is it Mr. Kraft? Of course, he wasn't in that position yet. Is it Jeff Dameron, which is my point of contact in the city? I've had very little responses, if any input. I've asked a couple of you individually, who is that point of contact? If you look at the lights at Wagner Park, they look fantastic. It's because Jeff Dameron was given the keys and said, go make that happen. Who's going to make our bathroom happen? I'm looking at all of you to make that happen. So the reason why that's important to me, TSA, Tullahoma Soccer Association, pays $320 a month for the 4 porta potties that sit at Johnson Lane bathrooms. It's not fair that our 501c3 is funding what this board has already approved using federal grant money. I'm asking when this will be done so that we can reduce that cost, provide a cost reduction to our soccer players of the community. We recently had to go up on fees to $80 a season for this purpose because all costs after COVID have gone up. We're trying to keep costs low, but as a 501c3 that's trying to manage an economical budget, it's tough. I spend $8,000 a season out there striping those fields. The city's helped great with their little robot, does a great job in 16 minutes, but they only do that for us at the beginning of the year. The rest of it's our responsibility to maintain. So I come to you today, help us reduce this $320 a month expense that we have to pay so the kids can at least pee in a box instead of on the ground or in the woods, okay? Funding's approved. Let's get it moving. Thank you.
Thank you for your input.
Emily Rath.
I'd like to donate my 2 minutes to Land Pro.
Elaine, you're next.
Good afternoon. I appreciate this opportunity to say what's on my mind. In just a minute, I'm going to offer 3 pieces of unsolicited advice. But first, I'm going to offer why I believe I'm uniquely qualified to offer this advice. First, I've sat in your chairs a total of 23 years, 18 as mayor and 5 as alderman. That's 23 years altogether. That's more than all of you combined, save a couple of years, as best I can figure. Second, I've been on the Tullahoma ballot 16 times, spanning my time as mayor, alderman, and state legislator, and was elected 16 times, spanning 31 years. Does that make me special? Of course not. But I do believe that record says I know Tullahoma folks pretty well. And I believe I can say with confidence the great majority of the people of Tullahoma do not like what they see and hear from their elected city leadership at present. So here's my advice to start getting Tullahoma and this board mayor and alderman back on track. First, in my opinion, you are not managers of city government. I fully recognize that you have fiscal and legal responsibilities as it relates to our city government. You have one employee, and that is the city administrator. It is entirely appropriate you define the expectations you have of the person you have selected to hold this important job and hold that person accountable. But let them do their job. Do not micromanage their efforts and do not interfere with their day-to-day work. You are the mayor and alderman. You are not the mayor and alderman of city government. You are the mayor and alderman for all of Tullahoma. The city government is but part of the fabric of Tullahoma. There is so much more, in my opinion, the 7 of you could and should be doing to move Tullahoma forward. Each of you should be out in the community making good things happen for the good people of Tullahoma. Use your leadership skills to make Tullahoma a more green community, a more fit community. Work to address the housing shortage in Tullahoma. Work to design a community so our young people want to return, remain, or relocate and raise their families here. What are you doing to help position Tullahoma as an arts destination? What are you doing to make Tullahoma a more clean and attractive community to inspire pride in our community? Nearly 60% of the 3rd graders failed their reading proficiency test last month. What are you doing to support our teachers in their efforts to achieve excellence in education? Your jobs as our elected leaders should be to address these challenges and as leaders create opportunities. Think strategically. Leaders make things happen. Look at the bigger picture. Are you thinking regionally in the areas of tourism, economic development, and infrastructure? Remember, you are community leaders, not managers of city government. Second, during my 23 years on this council, I have no recollection of an agenda item for a BMA meeting with only a caption and no exclamation behind it. When a member does that, it is not fair to other members and the public who have a right to see, understand, and ask questions prior to your vote. Third, if an agenda item pertains in any way to city government, the city administrator should offer a recommendation in the agenda whether or not he or she supports the agenda item and why. Please remember the city administrator is the manager of city government, not the 7 of you. If the agenda item expends money, the city administrator must identify the source of funds. The purpose of these last 2 suggestions is to streamline the meetings. If you read the agenda item, concur with the contents and the city administrator's recommendation, that will move the meetings along quicker. In summary, leadership is not easy. I understand that. You are our elected community leaders. Think bigger. Leaders encourage, leaders educate, leaders inspire, leaders challenge. I challenge each of you to rise above what you see and hear on the 2nd and 4th Monday nights during these BMA meetings, act like leaders, and start getting good things done for the good people of Tullahoma. I am ready, willing, and able to assist any of you to help get Tullahoma back on track. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Craig.
Scott Van Velser.
Well, he's right.
Scott Van Velser, Fairways Boulevard. I'm here to speak about agenda item 19, although I will endorse the creation of a microbrewery district in our community. That is a major economic driver for small communities like ours. But the HCC and the Historic Zoning Commission that is being proposed should be gutted like a fish. And I'll back into that. But I'll tell you my experience on it first, so that you understand where I'm coming from. Because I've served on the Historic Zoning Commission. I have talked to multiple times in a similar setting to a Historic Zoning Commission, just like this, kind of counseling them about the dangers of what an ordinance-driven regulatory authority can do to a community. And you only need to go around and look at the Main Street programs that are actually active and have been active since the 90s or early 2000s to understand what I'm talking about. You can see it where property owners are sort of forced into a box on how they spend their own money, and they just instead refuse to do it. And so the buildings fall in on themselves. I have nothing against the Main Street program. I think the aspirations of it sound really good on the surface. But when you start flipping rocks over and looking at what it means to give regulatory authority with the powers of penalty to a board that doesn't necessarily own property within that zone, you end up creating a situation where you don't get economic investment, which is the whole point of the Historic Zoning Commission. And I'll tell you, just I don't even need to read the copy and paste ordinance that is being proposed, because it's the same one that's been spread around since the 90s, and it was created to stop highways from being built through downtowns, which is not happening anymore. It's just not. We would never let that happen. So it started out from a good place, but it has turned into something that can be, if you've got a couple of grumpy members on that board or somebody who doesn't like a property owner there, they have the power of government to oppress that business owner. And I've seen it happen, and I'm happy to talk about this with anybody else that wants more information about that. I would hesitate to name some of those communities in public. But long and the short, pull the teeth out of this thing. I know we need some kind of design guidelines in order to qualify for grants and things like that for the Main Street program. And I think having guidelines that are suggestions and voluntary is the key to it all. You are asking a property owner to, hey, let's look at what it means to cohesively, when you upgrade your building, be on the same page. And also, one of the things that I really would like to talk about is the definition of historical. This is not something that you can do. It is incredibly difficult to define historical. For me, historical is not kicking in the bar door, slinging back a shot after you saddled up your horse out front. I love communities like that. That's not Tullahoma. I think Tullahoma is more like the jet age, space age, mid-century modern era. This building itself is from that era. But looking at and trying to define what it means to be historical is just another slippery slope when it comes to dealing with these historical zoning commissions. So I advise you to think about these things as you look at this ordinance creation, and gut it like a fish. Seriously, take all of the regulatory power out of it, because
Thank you, Mr. Van Salter.
My time up.
Your time has expired. I appreciate your comments.
all right, thanks.
Hunter North.
Lane talked about some good things we need to do in Tullahoma, and one thing we didn't get to do this year was the soapbox derby race. I have a vested interest in that. I've probably been involved in almost every race for over 20 years, and the very first champion we ever had from Tennessee was right here in Tullahoma, and we duplicated that with another person that won a world championship as well. So I hate to see that go away. So I know Mr. Kraft, if given the what he needs, I'm sure we can do this. The other thing I wanted to speak about is our Highland Rim Bicycle Club, which I'm the president of. And the Alderman and the mayor a few weeks ago received an email from one of our members, Stuart Coulter, and I appreciate Alderman Wilson, Mann, and Barry let me know they'd received that because I was copied on it. But Mr. Coulter had some great ideas when he heard about the crosswalk across Jackson Street. If we're able to do that, we'd like to combine the safety of that into also for cyclists as well. And we feel the way to do that would, and to tie in with that, ironically, one of the things that's a big safety issue is on Atlantic Street. We have railroad tracks that are not being used, and they're not at a direct angle, they're oblique across the street. So when a cyclist come across that, we have to go 90 degrees, so it requires almost 2 lanes to go across that. So, and Mr. Coulter sent some videos of accidents that have occurred, not at those tracks, but other tracks, and they're rather remarkable if you had a chance to watch those. And those tracks aren't being used, I don't believe. They've just been there ever since I've been here. And I would think they'd be very easily removed if we could get CSX to agree to do that. So that would be a great safety factor for cyclists on Atlantic Street. Because as cyclists, we try to stay off Jackson Street. But to cross Jackson Street, Mr. Coulter had the idea of having a very small pathway that would not allow for car usage, but for cycling and pedestrians to come down from Atlantic Street and come in between Dr. Mahan's office and that building. And I would assume the crosswalk would be in that area, and that would allow cyclists to go across the crosswalk, and it would be much safer if we were able to do that. So just keep that in mind when you look at the crosswalk proposition. I know the state, because it's a state road, if that'll ever happen, I hope we can have some safety crossing Jackson, because we recently had our ride of silence, and normally we have a police escort that takes us around town. We had to cross Jackson Street at like 7 at night. With no police escort, and I had to get out and stop traffic myself. Even though we requested police assistance, we usually have police that escort us on that ride every year, but they weren't able to do it this year. So I'd love to see the soapbox derby continue in Tullahoma. I mean, almost every publication you see, whether it's in video or print, has something about the soapbox derby race, and I hope we can continue that. And I hope we can do something for the safety of our cyclists in town as well. So I appreciate your input, and we'll be glad to try to help in any way.
Thank you, Dr. Norris. Thank you.
Elizabeth Bowling.
I'm Elizabeth Bowling. I'm at 999 Forest Drive. I just wanted to thank you for item number 19 on the agenda. I think that there's some possible confusion. This isn't proposing any new zoning ordinance. These are zoning ordinances that already exist and that just are not being followed. And this came to the attention of the Community Development Plan Committee, and we initially asked when Ms. Moody was here, and she said that the overlays were created and mapped, but we did confirm with Mary that those were not showing on the maps. The committee sent a letter to the mayor and to all aldermen, and then followed up through the new portal and provided a copy of that letter. Alderman Glick has been at our meetings and has heard the discussion with Mary and with the committee just in what needed to be done. That's why the committee sent a letter requesting that the board and the mayor abide by the current zoning ordinances and let community members know that there are openings on the Historic Zoning Commission. I believe the language in the ordinance says that there shall be, and I think that those were referenced in my letter. I'm not sure. I didn't hear responses, so I'm not sure that everyone has gotten it or read it, but I know that in 408, section 408, the historical overlay district, in item B, it says the historic overlay districts which have been created shall be shown as an overlay on the official zoning map, and then it also says that there shall be a historic zoning commission. So I appreciate Alderman Glick bringing this to the attention. I don't know that there's really anything to vote on other than just instructing Mary that she does need to put those overlays on the map, and then letting community members know about the openings on the Historic Zoning Commission. So thank you. And I will say that I also went to our farmers market this afternoon, and it was great. And I think it's great that we have two. I went to the one at South Jackson, and I haven't been to the one at Trinity Lutheran yet, but it's great opportunity for the citizens.
Thank you, Ms. Bowling. So, is there anyone we may have overlooked that would have any comments to the board? Now we'll close the comments from citizens. And at this time, I'll ask for the board to approve the agenda as presented. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda as presented? Motion from Glick, seconded by Mathis. Comment from Alderman.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have an amendment to the agenda I would like to add. I have already spoken with Ms. Lori prior to this, so she is aware. I would like to add an amendment to create an item to instruct the interim city administrator to reschedule the executive session that was canceled by Bob Burns and Associates today within the next 48 hours, and to inform Mr. Burns and Associates if they fail to do so, the city will file a formal complaint with the BPR based on the highlighted subsections of the rules of professional conduct, that which I will pass out if this item makes it onto the agenda.
Yeah, we have an item, an amendment to add to the agenda. Need a second.
I'll second it.
We got a second. We got a comment from Alderman Berry.
Yes, Mayor. You're the only person who has the authority to call an executive session.
There was already one called.
And you're the only person. So this amendment, while I understand the intent, it doesn't matter whether the board tells him to do it or not. You're the only person that can do that.
There was already one called.
That's all that I had. I'll give the floor back so that she can speak.
Yes, the executive session had been called and the executive scheduled due to scheduling conflicts with the attorneys that were involved. That was the reason it was canceled.
Right.
So before another session can be called, that would have to be coordinated with their schedules. Okay, Alderman Wilson.
I do think that we need to have an executive session. I saw that we have litigation that I was not even familiar with, so I would like to get an update on city litigation that we have.
The executive session will be scheduled as soon as the attorneys that are required will be there.
This was a twofold motion, and so we're asking, I guess, in essence, for you to call it because they scheduled it and then they canceled it. So this is on them, and that is against and in violation of the rules of professional conduct that I have listed here. So I would like to at least hear my motion and add it to the agenda. We have a second, so it should go on because it was twofold.
You have a motion down, we had a motion down, a second, and we have a discussion yet. Alderman Wilson, you have something? We'll vote on that amendment at this time to add that to the agenda or not.
I have a question. Is that an executive session that we're voting on about all the city litigation or just one?
Yes, all of it.
You can't vote in an executive session.
Yes, he can because it's
I said you can't vote. None of us can vote in an executive session.
not in an executive session. He's asking about this. This executive session, is my understanding,
All the city litigation.
was for all of them.
Our
Yeah.
city attorney can address the questions regarding the executive session.
This motion is out of order. It's also an idle threat by Ms. Almacher to threaten these attorneys that have been representing the city at the behest of and hired by our insurance carrier to do that. 48 hours to require someone to be here is totally unrealistic. We had no idea what their schedules are. Trial lawyers have matters scheduled months in advance, and if they have to be rescheduled, then that means they have to juggle their schedules as well. I think it's totally inappropriate to do this. I think this motion is totally inappropriate. I think it's a self-serving motion because Ms. Almacher has injected herself into some litigation against the city, which is, I think, something that's improper, and I'll address this whole issue later on if you'd like, but I don't think this motion should move forward.
It's speculation, Mr. Worsham.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second, we have the discussion. You'll vote yes to put this on the agenda, vote no, which the attorney has indicated it's improper. So you will vote at this point in time. There are 4 yeses and 3 noes. So we can go on the agenda at that time, take it up at that time. Any other changes in the agenda? Alderman Berry.
Mayor, it's been 119 days since we put our HR director on paid leave. I'd like to make a motion to discuss directing the interim city administrator to reinstate Costa Bryce.
We have a motion to instruct the city administrator to reinstate Costa Bryce. We have a motion by Berry. Need a second. Fields for lack of a second. That will not be added to the agenda. Okay, I have an agenda item that I would like, change in the agenda that I'd like to put forward. I think it could be acceptable. We have a very lengthy agenda item tonight and on our regular board meeting, but we have a very short board meeting. So So in order to hear that, our board meeting agenda, I'd like to move that to the first of our session before we do anything else on our agenda. So we'll move that to, so that's got a motion by, it's my motion, and I need a second. Second by Almacher. And we'll vote on that.
What are we moving? I didn't catch that.
Just moving the beer board up.
Oh, okay.
Moving the beer board to the first of the meeting. Ready to vote? So that passes 7-0. And if there are no other changes to the agenda, we'll move into the discussion here. We'll vote on to approve the agenda as amended. That passes 7-0. So we'll handle the agenda as amended. But first, we'll move to the reports from our alderman and the attorney and the interim city administrator. Let's start with Alderman Almacher tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As most of you know, I've been out of town for a couple of weeks, but I did take note on some things that are going on in town and listened to Mr. Carroll's comments. I wanted him to know that I personally will be looking into where we are on that project, but in the interim, I would like to see if there's something we can do to help accommodate with perhaps some trailer bathrooms during their season. And I'm not sure what those cost, but maybe Kenny could get back to us on that. And as to Mr. Curley, thank you for the thoughtful comments and your willingness to continue to serve the city of Tullahoma. I wanted to direct you to a little project me and Ms. Moorhead have going on together, in which we are trying to advocate for an expungement fair for our citizens of Tullahoma, and perhaps do that at CD Stamps. And so if you two would like to get together, I'm sure we would love to enlist your help on that project. Let you know there are some things going on, and I know I'm not the only one up here. I won't toot their horns for them, but we all have projects going on, and we'd love to have all the help we can get, and thank you for being a concerned citizen. That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Berry.
No report, Mayor.
Alderman Glee.
As some of you are aware that watch the board meetings, I've started a project trying to improve the cell phone service in Tullahoma. I know that it's not in the purview of the board. It's not a governmental agency, but maybe as a board we could put our weight behind and try to get them to improve the service. The city administrator reached out and sent a letter to Verizon. They sent us back basically a form letter saying, thanks, it's nice hearing from you, but we really need to hear from the citizens of Tullahoma, or the citizens, the users, that their service is bad. Now, if everybody that's told me how bad their service is will call Verizon, we might get something done. So I know I will call Monday. I might call more than once. So if everybody would call Verizon, I have a phone number to call. The phone number is 1-800-922-0204. Or they may dial *611 from their Verizon devices. So please call and express your dissatisfaction with the cell phone service in Tullahoma to 1-800-922-0204 or *611 from a Verizon device. And that'll conclude my report.
Thank you. Alderman Mathis.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to thank Mr. Curley for his input. Very, very always to the point, very much needed, and he does an outstanding job in presenting himself well. And thank you, Mr. Curley.
Alderman Wilson.
I attended the Memorial Day celebration that we had in town, or the event that we had in town, and it was well attended, and it was a lot of really great speakers. We have a great area over there. If you have not visited, with pavers with different names of our veterans that are local veterans in town. If you haven't visited, it's a must. I attended the tree board this past meeting, and I just wanted to let everyone know that on Wednesday, June 28th at 5 p.m., there will be an arboretum and tree walk. For anyone that's not familiar where our arboretum is, it's at 908 Country Club Drive. It's right next to East Middle School, and also where the disc golf course is. So I'd like to see everyone come out for that. It'd be really nice.
Thank you. Alderman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I attended as well the Memorial Day service at History Park. Mr. Howard Thompson, a Vietnam veteran and Governor's Gold Star Volunteer Award recipient, was the guest speaker and gave a very moving speech. The Veterans Memorial Scholarship was awarded to Zaylin Spinner of Tullahoma High School and Macy Fletcher of Moore County High School. And the new engraved pavers were dedicated as well, with the service concluding with the playing of taps by Justin Sells, a previous scholarship recipient. I want to thank everyone that was involved in that service. It was very well done and a great tribute to our fallen heroes. I'd also like to update the board and our citizens that the charter revision process is underway. MTAS is working on updating our charter and will be keeping us posted on when we will receive an updated version to begin work on our revisions. I would encourage anyone with suggestions to please email me or Kenny Pearson so we can start compiling those together. To date, I have only received 2 emails concerning this, so please reach out if you have something to add so it can be considered. Also, I would like to remind everyone that the backpacks are here and ready to be filled with school supplies. You can drop those donated supplies off here at City Hall. The donation bin is here outside this room if you would like to donate when attending these meetings. We are partnering with the local United Way's Stuff the Bus effort, so you can also donate to other bins around Tullahoma as well. I'm challenging everyone who comes out to these meetings to help fill these backpacks to help a great local cause. And finally, I want to mention, and this may be a little early, an effort I'm working with to work with Planning and Codes, volunteers, Ms. Jamie Moorhead and others to help update and restore neglected areas in Tullahoma. So stay tuned on that. I'll have more on that later. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Mann. I had a couple of glorious opportunities this past 2 weeks. One was to present a proclamation to a lady in town, Miss Opal Casey, who celebrated her 102nd birthday. That was, and she's quite impressive at 102. Also had an opportunity to do a very unique event, recognizing Ms. Rita Bogle at the at Vanderbilt Harton. She's been a medical laboratory technician at that hospital for 50 years, doing the same thing she did the day she retired as she did when she went there, but maintaining her upgrades and certifications through the time. And what a tribute to her and to that employer to have that. Had a very interesting meeting with what we call the Tech Hub in Tullahoma. We had a group of entrepreneurs who met at the seafood house to talk about ways to encourage entrepreneurship in Tullahoma. So with that, I had one of the wonderful things I had an opportunity to do last week was to accept a check from TDOT for $103,150 for the right-of-way to the cemetery. So that is checks in the bank, right, sir? Okay. One of the things they will start work there as soon as we get the fence removed. We had to make a deposit back to TDOT to verify that we will be removing the fence And once once we remove the fence, we apply for that deposit we made, we'll get that back. So,
Shifting the money
but as soon as you
around.
move the fence, we'll get a refund. So that was a very nice occasion with TDOT. They're slow in getting the work done, but they're very thorough in what they do. So that concludes my report, so I'll move on to our interim city administrator. We have another report from Alderman Berry.
Sorry, I forgot the most important thing today. I'd like to wish my mother a happy 32nd again birthday today.
Well, I think that's appropriate. Thank you. Happy birthday, Mom. Okay, with that, we'll move on to our interim city administrator. Excuse me, we'll go to the attorney for his report first.
First of all, I'd like to add an addendum to the mayor's announcement about the $103,000 that TDOT paid us this past week. Please recall that we acquired an additional $10,000, which was $10,000 over their initial offer, in order to replace any memorial trees that are adversely affected by the widening of Wilson Avenue. So that money, the $10,000, should be earmarked for that part of the project. Also, the fence that will be removed is the metal fencing, and then we'll need to then reassemble that once we can find masons to re-erect the stone columns to which they will be attached. So that's part of that project. Today I exchanged deeds with the attorney for the Hart and Family Partners to straighten out William Northern Boulevard, leading into the airport area there. That will also accommodate not only our straightening out, but also accommodate the construction plans for the new hotel that we built there on that property. We are going to be introducing at the next board meeting an amendment to our ordinance through the Planning and Codes Department, allowing us to assert liens against property owners who have fines assessed to them in city court or by the administrative hearing officer, in order that we could attach those fines to their property taxes if they don't pay them in some other manner. I'd just like for you to discuss, and perhaps at some point in time put this on the agenda at a later meeting, the fact that we have 3 different sets of rules that we've enacted. We have one set of rules that's in our code of ordinances that was enacted by ordinance. We have another set of rules that's been amended 3 times, and then we have also reference to Robert's Rules of Order. And I believe we need to study that and to establish one standard set of rules that we follow regarding the conducting of business here. You might also note that the mayor sent you information this week about some recent legislation that the legislature has enacted relative to agenda items being required by the municipalities. MemTAS sent us a mailing about that. In my opinion, I think we ought to consider that seriously. I ought to study that seriously, because I think it's improper, perhaps, and not in the best interest of good government, for people to be able to add items to the agenda at the meeting that will be voted on that night. I think that if items are added to the agenda, they should be added to the agenda for discussion only, and then brought to a later agenda after staff has had an opportunity to discuss those and to research those items and prepare the background information that I think the board needs to have in order to be able to consider those items intelligently. Thank you.
City Administrator.
I'm on. Did attend the chamber coffee at First Vision Bank. A lot of good people there. Enjoyed the fellowship and being able to see a lot of businesses within our community come together to achieve, the networking necessary to continue to thrive within our community. On May 25th, we had active shooter drills at the Tennessee Corrections Academy. Many departments were involved in that. Tullahoma Fire and Tullahoma Police were also involved in that. They did a lot of different scenarios of how they can take care of active shooters. It's part of our training and trying to continue to have ourselves ready in case anything does happen in this area. I did attend the Memorial Day celebration. I appreciate Parks and Recreation for all their work of getting the chairs out there quickly, the tents, and making sure that our the audio equipment was working. And I also appreciate the fire department bringing out the honor guard. They did a wonderful job. As Kurt talked about the Verizon letter, I did get that Verizon letter in. I've done some extra research and just looking at different things that we have. One of the things was brought to my attention that TUA was talking about having them put on their water towers, but that's been like 2 years, and they talked about it 2 years ago, and they've never contacted them back on it. I did get some information recently from Butch that there's a possibility that a Verizon tower is going to go out near Ellis Acres. That's in process, and if they can get everything situated, we could have another cell tower out in that area. So that would help a lot in that area. Pretty much the last 3 weeks we've been crunching numbers, looking at the budget, trying to figure out ways that we can fund things, trying to make sure that we're getting everything that needs to be done. That's the big thing. And one of the things that we have on here is to try to have a study session next Monday to talk a lot about those things that we've been looking at. So hopefully help us to continue to provide the services to this community that they deserve and they expect. So that's all I have for this week.
The city attorney has another comment.
Mr. LaBarre, the attorney for the purchasers of the 411 East Carroll Street property, the Rock 10 building, and I'm working on a contract. We did receive the July rent from them, and Ms. Wilson and I discussed it, and I did suggest to her that she go ahead and accept that. We need to put this matter on the agenda for the next board meeting to authorize a notice to them that they will be given until August the 1st to vacate the property. So if y'all consider putting that on the agenda for next time, then we can write the letter to them and give them that notice. Because we should have the contract ready and completed prior to that time, and that will give them a month in order to take whatever action they need to move their property out of there. So that's just a suggestion.
Thank you,
have any
Mr.
questions
Parker.
about that?
Yeah, I had one question. I
Yes.
remember in our meeting, we proposed to give them 3 to 6 months to vacate. This is the building, right? I'm thinking about the
Yes,
right one
right.
with all of the, I mean, if August 1st is amenable to them, of course, but I just want to make sure that they have ample time.
I don't know. I just want to put this on the agenda for a discussion next time.
Okay.
That's why we shouldn't do it tonight.
Right.
And then we can discuss that between now and then. Maybe we can find out what their time frame is and all that. The purchasers are anxious to get busy on the building, so I think we need to work with them as well. Okay?
Right, sure.
So if you do put that on the agenda for next meeting, if that's okay with you all, then we can have the background information for it at that time.
Sounds good to me.
Very good, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll move to the regular agenda. Excuse me. We'll move to the beer board at this point in time. If you'll flip over to your back of your packet, you'll see that we have a. So I'm going to recess the board meeting while we move to the beer board. If I can find it. This is for the Highland Rim Kiwanis Club for the July celebration. Wait just a minute. Our agendas are getting too long. Okay, item number 23114 is to consider request for the excuse me. On the beer, do we have any public comments regarding the beer board? Hearing no public comments, we'll move on to the consent agenda. The only thing on the consent agenda is the minutes from the May 22nd meeting. Motion from Barry, seconded by Almacher. Any discussion? No? Ready to vote? And the agenda passes 7-0. There's no other unfinished business, so the only new business on is item number BB24 beer application for a special events permit for Independence Day celebration on July the 3rd at Fraser McEwen Park, Grider Stadium. Ms. Emily Harass will be the president of the Highland Rim. She'll be organizing, she'll complete it, and the application is requested the beer board waive all fees. So I'd like to get a motion to approve that with the waiver of fees. Motion from motion from Almacher, seconded by Mann. Ready to vote. That passes 7-0. Being no other new business, the beer board will be adjourned. Moving back to our regular agenda items now. With that, the consent agenda was approved with the approval of the minutes. I will read the caption for the consent agenda. They'll include the minutes from the May 22nd meeting. And then we announced a vacancy on the Tullahoma Housing Authority Board and considered applications for interested citizens. Item number 23-114 is we're announcing a vacancy on the Duck River Utility Commission and consider application for interested citizens to serve a three-year term ending June the 30th. Item number 23-105, approve a mutual aid fire protection and emergency services agreement between Arnold Air Force Base and Tullahoma City. Item number 23-106, schedule a study session with Board of Mayor and Alderman on Monday, June the 19th, that's next Monday, at 6 p.m. Tullahoma Municipal Citizens to discuss capital projects. That's when we'll get into capital projects that we talked about tonight. Okay, a motion to approve the consent agenda. Second motion by Barry, seconded by Wilson. Comment?
I don't know about anybody else's schedule, but I will not be able to attend Monday, June 19th.
Thank you for letting us know. Okay, we're ready to vote? The consent agenda is approved 7-0. Under unfinished business, we have 3 items. The first item under unfinished business is ordinance number 1594, an ordinance of the City of Tullahoma adopting the annual budget and the tax rate for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2024 for passage on the second of 3 readings. Motion from Barry, seconded by Wilson. Discussion.
Ms. Wilson, on this budget that we are going to approve or disapprove, what exactly increases do we have for each department so we'll know exactly where the money's going? For example, if you said the school system, they came and they asked for, what, $1.4 million for teacher raises. Did we approve that or not?
They did not ask for, are you saying the school system did ask for raises? No. Or you're just giving that as an example?
Yeah, they did too.
Out of their budget, not ours.
They didn't ask us for funding.
Out of theirs. That was out of their budget, he says.
That's out of their budget. They did not ask us for additional funding. They will receive additional funding from sales tax because they get a portion of that by law.
Alderman Almacher, you recognized.
Miss Wilson and Mr. Pearson and I had a meeting today, and I'm not going to divulge the details, but we were brainstorming, and hopefully we can discuss it more at the June 19th meeting next Monday if people can attend, and we'll update you because it's just a study session, so we won't take any votes there. But it's my understanding that we've got kind of a budget crunch this year. We definitely could spend a lot more than our anticipated revenues. And I want the taxpayers to know that I will in no way vote for a tax increase. So we're trying to find a way around that. However, I feel it I'm not gonna make the motion tonight, because I know I'm gonna get calls, and I'm gonna accept those calls and take my punishment beforehand, before I do it at the next meeting. But while we may approve the nonprofit expenditures this year, because there hasn't been enough notice, I do foresee that having to be either cut in its entirety or cut substantially for next year for us to be able to accommodate for the new SROs and all of our new expenditures that are coming about this year. And if anybody has any ideas on how we can raise that revenue otherwise, obviously it wouldn't affect the tourism. I am all ears for ways to figure out how to generate that income or where to cut, so that I can bring that to next Monday's meeting. So I just kind of wanted to put that out there now, so people had a little understanding that I'm not proposing to cut it this year, but I may put it in the budget that it would be terminated next year, with the expectation of that, and to give that notice to the nonprofits. That's where I'm at.
Alderman Berry, you recognize.
Just a quick idea on how to raise the revenue. We can stop scaring away new commercial development, new real estate development, and growth, and raise our real property tax revenue so that we have money to do these things that we need to do.
You have comments? Ready to vote? Vote to approve ordinance number 1594.
Mayor,
Yes, you may go ahead.
this will also need to be amended because this version has the additional equipment, building reserve, capital projects. It has other budgets added in, so it will need to be amended to accept the items as presented.
We can back
And then
that
in your
up.
third one, you will have the school.
Hold on.
I move to amend it as required by Ms. Wilson to include those things that she said that I cannot recall.
Okay, I don't know that you're speaking, your microphone is not picking up very well, so you might make that motion a little more clearly in your microphone.
Move to amend to include, tell me again.
The detail as presented here, which includes all funds. It has your capital projects, it has your debt, equipment reserve, building reserve, medical trust added.
So as amended, as presented. Move to amend as presented in the packet. I think is the easiest way to say that.
So it is in the packet, that your amendment.
It's on the first page.
Okay, Alderman Glick, you recognize.
Okay, I just wanted to, for those at home or that have not received the agenda item, I just wanted to reiterate what we are voting on here. We're voting on the annual budget, and it is funding the city with no tax increase, with using $641,000 worth of reserves. And this budget will fund the SROs in each school and $650,000 worth of paving. Is that correct, Ms. Wilson?
No, it does not have the SROs in here at this point. That is something that is waiting some kind of a funding source or determination by the board to fund it differently. What is in there right now is $50,000 to pay for overtime or part-time with current employees, as we did in the spring.
So we're still waiting, sorry to interrupt, we're still waiting on the governor to see if that comes through before we pass on the final reading, is that correct? Okay, so we're adding it, it's just not in here, we're still seeing if, maybe he'll come through with the funds.
Should we maybe delay on the paving to fund the SROs? Or how can we accomplish that? I mean, I know it seems like right here we're saying we're not having a tax increase, but if we're going to do the paving and hire all the SROs that aren't in the budget right now, we can't do it without a tax increase, or else taking a whole lot more money out of reserves. So The numbers don't add up to me, so it seems like at this point, we need to be making a decision on how we propose to do that. Do we want to delay on the paving until, and then maybe when we hear that the governor gives us the money for the SROs, then we could add the paving back in? Or I'll yield the floor for some answers or ideas.
Let me just comment on my understanding of what you're telling us, Ms. Wilson. You're telling us that we're going to fund SROs, not new personnel, but using current staff to staff the SROs at the schools with the budget as you're doing, as we have right now. You have funded that.
That is the only thing that is in this current.
That's correct. So that's the way we're getting SROs into the schools currently. And we can do that and pave until we get money from the state to fund SROs.
Is that long-term? Is that a tenable?
That is not a long-term solution. That's the reason why we wanted to have that study session coming up this Monday, because we wanted to talk about some alternative ways that we could possibly do this, which we could amend the budget at the next meeting. That might be take the paving out like you're discussing at the present time and adding it back in as we get that money in from the state. That state money should be coming in, but we cannot budget for something we don't have. So until that happens, we won't be able to budget it. So yeah, what you said about maybe the streets taking it out for the time being and then working on putting it back in. But we have some other ideas that could possibly help out and make some different changes. So I think, once we do that study session, you'll be able to see a little bit more of that. But it is not attainable for the long period. There's only $25,000 in overtime that's been put in there right now, and $25,000 for a part-time person, and that's if they do get a part-time person to do it for the few months before we get that money, and the $25,000 will not last forever in overtime, and plus our police force will be strained to continue to do that as they did at the end of the 7 weeks of this past year.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that it was probably a strain on the police force when it's small enough to try to police this whole city and then act as SROs as well. We know the SROs are something we have to do. That's not an option. And really, paving is really not an option either, but it is something that I think we might just have to wait to able to afford that. But hopefully the money from the governor comes through. I just wanted to make sure we're all aware of that on this second reading. Normally the second reading is the reading where you make most of the changes to the budget. Third reading is just kind of goes through. So we'll be doing that a little bit differently, I suppose. So I just wanted to make the point so we all knew where we are.
Alderman Berry, you recognized?
That was my understanding of how we're doing the SROs as well as part-time, and that is definitely not sustainable. Even cutting the, sorry, I'm twitchy today. Even cutting the paving still doesn't quite put us there, right? That will cover personnel and a little bit more, but the first year in SROs, I think, is around 1.2 by the time we count equipment and training and all that for the new SROs. So we're still $600,000 shy, even cutting the paving. I do like the idea of trying to find a creative way to get this into the budget and to begin hiring SROs, because we're not the only agency that's getting this money. Every municipality or school system, I don't know how they're going to do it, by municipality or school system, every public school system is going to be eligible for this money. So that means every agency out there is going to be hiring SROs at the same time. So that makes, I'd rather get ahead of that curve, because I'm sure that there's a limited supply
Right.
of SROs out there as well. Maybe, I don't know about the paving, but we definitely need to. I'm looking forward to the 19th because I would like to find some creative ways. I'm not going to say cutting the paving. That I'm scared somebody will smack me when I walk out the door.
Any further discussion? There's no further discussion. We're ready to vote on ordinance number 1594 on the second of 3 readings. Passes 7-0. Next is ordinance number 1595, an ordinance to amend the Code of Ordinances of Tullahoma by amending Title 14. This is the ordinance zoning and land use control. This is Section 202, the Board of Zoning Appeals, by deleting it in its entirety and substituting new Section 202 for the Board of Appeals for the passage on second and final reading. Get a motion on the floor. Motion by Matheson, seconded by Thomaker. And I know that there is an extensive amount of documentation that's been provided to us for that. And quite frankly, I don't know that I remember all of it, but I remember a lot of it. But if, what I'd like to do at this time is simply take a brief recess for each one of us to take as much time as you need to read and understand all of the documentation that came to us before we vote on this. So we'll be in recess until
See you tomorrow.
at least 5 minutes. I know that our city attorney may put an attachment in your packet, and I apologize for the quality of that. I had to go back and run a legible copy, but in that it may have been quite difficult to read. I'm going to ask, before we move any further, I'd like for, if you would, Mr. Worthing, to bring your thoughts to this board on this agenda item. I'd ask you to not include that in your attorney's report, but wait till we got to this item on the floor.
Well, I'm sorry about the quality of what you had there to reproduce. Is that my fault or what?
I'm not blaming anyone. It's
Okay.
just,
The board asked for a legal opinion from MTAS Legal Department about that. We got one from Ms. Hodge, and that's included in your agenda packet. Also, Ms. Samaniago has explained to you all the proper method whereby the action that the board deemed to take could be accomplished, and then I've reviewed that and done some legal research in addition to that which I reviewed from Ms. Hodge. It's my opinion, based upon that legal research, that we should have followed a different method to accomplish what we wish to accomplish. First of all, my research has indicated that this board does not have the legal authority under state law to appoint itself as the Board of Zoning Appeals. We're not required to even have a Board of Zoning Appeals, but if we choose to do so, we have two methods whereby we can appoint one. Either we can elect that the Planning Commission also act as the Board of Zoning Appeals, or we can appoint a separate body of people to act as a Board of Zoning Appeals. But under state law and under a settled law known as Dillon's Rule, which is a rule from the Iowa Supreme Court for many years that, of course, on jurisdictions all over this country have followed, we do not have the authority, this board does not, to appoint itself as the Board of Zoning Appeals. So my suggestion is that we either postpone this or vote this down, and instead study and present an ordinance to the board whereby we go through the proper method that's been outlined by Ms. Samaniego, that we have to go through the zoning ordinance provisions in order to create a new Board of Zoning Appeals in lieu of the one that we have right now. I don't think that this ordinance, if it were passed, would be valid and legal. I think it would be in nullity, because I believe it is beyond the authority of this board to take action that the legislature has not authorized us to take. If you have any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer them.
if this motion passes, I believe in your report you indicated that it would be a nullity.
If you passed it, I think it's a nullity, yes, sir.
And in effect, that means that, explain.
That means that it's of no force and effect. That means that it doesn't mean anything.
Thank you.
You and I looked up the word nullity. I'll be happy to Google it again and read the definition of nullity to you all again. But it's just, we can't do it, so if we can't do it, it's void, it's invalid. But but we could amend this ordinance, not tonight because we don't have the mechanism to do it, amend this very same ordinance to go through the process. I believe that Ms. Samaniego has suggested as to how we do it. We can, in fact, change the Board of Zoning Appeals to a different group of people, but we've got to go through the proper method to do that. And that's what I suggest we do.
Okay. Thank you.
May I?
I know that you spent some time with this city administrator. Do you have any input?
As far as the this ordinance, so we were just tasked to check the legality of it. The council did that. Mary went through her portion of it and wrote out the way that it should be done. I have no other further comment towards that.
Thank you. Well, Mama, you're recognized.
Well, I have to give it to Mr. Worsham and Ms. Hodge and Ms. Samaniego. If I were in fact trying to create a Board of Zoning Appeals, they would be correct. However, I think the confusion here is that the Board of Zoning Appeals that is created in 205 of the statute is not the same as the Board of Appeals, that which I'm trying to create in 207. However, the creation of a Board of Appeals, as Mr. Worsham said, since the Board of Zoning Appeals is technically optional, The creation of a separate Board of Appeals makes the necessary need for a Board of Zoning Appeals one that is moot. And I too was confused. In fact, I made the very same argument he did 6 months ago about that, well, wait a minute, there are certain things that should go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, like if someone disagreed with a building official's decision, right? That could go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And I was mistaken and corrected by Mr. Worsham himself, and I happen to have that on recording because it was during the session for the Planning Commission in which we have to get our 8 hours, and we had an outsider come in and teach us all about the authority of the Board of Zoning Appeals. And at this time, so that it's not taken out of context, I would like to play 3.5 minutes of that video, and then I'd like to continue my comments if it's okay with you, Mr. Mayor, so that I can explain.
You have that to play? We'll hear it.
What are your powers? Again, Dylan's rule tells you what your powers are as a Board of Zoning Appeals. And I sat in a meeting one time, and the guy, probably one of the nicest guys you'd ever want to meet, said, well, why are we here for if we can't give people relief? Well, that's not the point. It's not giving people relief. What it does is a set of criteria of what you can and cannot do. The first power you have, here's the first power is that I disagree with the decision of the building official.
I told you that does come to us.
No, it does. The Board of Zoning Appeals.
I told you.
Wait, you gotta let me tell you what the disagreement is, all right?
Okay, go ahead.
It's not a codes disagreement.
Okay.
It's a zoning ordinance disagreement.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So that would come through planning staff, not our building official.
Well, it depends on who makes that decision.
That's the thing.
Okay.
The building, let me, just so you understand, we have a building official and a building department that's part of Public Works, and I'm the planning department.
Right.
So the building official can deny a building permit based on building code, and that's appealed to the Board of Appeals. The Board of Zoning Appeals is a variance to the zoning code.
Do we have a Board of Appeals?
We don't have a Board of Appeals.
We do have a Board of Appeals.
We do?
I don't think it's active right now, but there is a Board of Appeals.
So that.
I don't even know if we've ever, honestly, I've never heard.
Well, it would be the Board of Zoning Appeals, and this is why in our charter. Hey, Mr. Worsham.
Ma'am.
Mr. Worsham, this is a question for you. So in our charter, we never did revise our charter, and I believe it is in our charter. When they broke away building and code, or the buildings and put it under Public Works.
Right.
Okay, so Public Works, it used to be planning and code. Do you remember? We never did actually change the.
That's not, none of that's in our charter. None of that.
It's in the city code.
Umbrella thing that gives the Board of Mayor
Right.
a lot of power and authority.
It enacted the municipal code. Right, the enactment of the
In our
municipal.
code of ordinances by ordinance. So that was changed by ordinance.
It was changed?
So our code of ordinances has been changed to reflect.
So when we changed that though, that would have been this change here to where we would technically have to have a separate Board of Appeals and then Board of Zoning Appeals, because prior to that, it would have just been all together because the department was all together. Makes sense?
I don't think so. I think the statutory things he's talking about. State law dictates what a Board of Zoning Appeals will do in its function, and what a Board of Appeals will do in its function. We probably have in our code of ordinance, I don't know. It talks about provisions for a Board of Appeals. We just never have. Yeah, it talks about it in there.
So if you agree with the building inspector, if they did not, let's say they come out and you fail an inspection, you say, I didn't fail this inspection.
That's not the Board of Zoning Appeals.
I know, that's what I'm saying. That would go to a Board of Appeals.
Right.
But what if you don't have a Board of Appeals?
Well, we either enact the Board of Appeals, or I guess it goes to the Board of Mayor and Alderman, or to courts. I'm not quite sure. Sure, that's not.
And we should enact a Board of Appeals, and it should be the Board of Mayor and Alderman. As was said by Mr. Worsham, and I'm not finished, and I'll let you speak to this. So what we found out in that training was, what I learned in that training, is that they are two separate boards. What I also learned is that we do not have to have a Board of Zoning Appeals. What I third learned is that the Board of Appeals is a separate board from the Board of Zoning Appeals, and if we were enacting a Board of Zoning Appeals, 205 would apply, and I'm not sure, well, it doesn't say we couldn't designate ourselves, it just says 7 members. Or 5 members, depending on the population. However, we're not enacting a Board of Zoning Appeals. We are enacting a completely separate authority that has a broader authority that can hear both things under planning and codes, as far as if people have grievances and want to take that up the chain of command. And what that will do, folks, is that will save us and litigation costs in the future, and give every citizen, every person, and every builder, every developer another course of recourse that goes to this elected body. And could we keep the Board of Zoning Appeals? Sure, but it would be just more bureaucracy, because like the state code says, we don't have to have it. And 207 lays out what the Board of Appeals can do, and it has all the authority plus some of the Board of Zoning Appeals, which again is a different board, and there is no direction on that we cannot appoint ourselves. In fact, by Mr. Worsham's words alone, it should be the Board of Mayor and Aldermen.
I'd like to clarify that. However many months ago that was, I hadn't had an opportunity to research this issue. I believe that the Board of Appeals and the Board of Zoning Appeals are synonymous, based upon the research that I have taken out, that they're not two separate boards. The research that I did indicate that that was the case. So I believe that I was wrong several months ago when we talked about that. That was a totally different issue from this anyway. This was an issue about whether or not we can enact something by resolution that had to be done by ordinance, just like I believe that this action has to be done by ordinance, which is proper. But I just don't think this particular ordinance is the proper way to do that. And I don't believe that we can have either a Board of Appeals or a Board of Zoning Appeals that is constituted by the board, let's say, populated by the Board of Mayor and Alderman. That's my opinion. Now, y'all can disagree if you wish, but I suggest that since this matter is one that's rather important, that we might want to do some additional research before we enact this ordinance. That's just my opinion and my suggestion and recommendation.
May I just explain where this came from? Just one more second. This, I think he's confused. This was during the training, and you were backed up, and we were told by the trainer that they were two separate boards in this meeting. And yes, we were. And that one had the authority to hear building codes violations. But if you read number 3 in chapter 13-7-207, the powers of a Board of Appeals, number 3 says, out of the other things, it says, where by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property at the time of the enactment of the zoning regulation, basically that you may grant a variance from such strict application. It also says that basically you can hear and decide appeals where it is alleged by the appellant that there is error in any order, requirement, permit, decision, or refusal made by the municipal building commissioner or any other administrative official in the carrying out or enforcement of any provision of any ordinance. Our Board of Zoning Appeals, and statutorily, does not and cannot, by state statute, have that authority, which is why this has to be a separate board. And that is also laid out that they are two separate boards in the documents that are before you, because it says that the chief legislative body may create a Board of Zoning Appeals, and it tells you what that has to look like. But if you keep going over to this page 2 of the Westlaw of Thompson Reuters, page 68, appeals to the Board of Appeals may be taken by any person aggrieved or by any officer, department, board, or bureau of the municipality affected by any grant or refusal of a building permit or other administrative official based in whole or part upon the provisions of this ordinances or any other ordinances. There is no way statutorily a Board of Zoning Appeals by state statute could have that kind of authority. Only the chief legislative body of the municipality could, and that is why the Board of Appeals, as Mr. Worsham previously said, would have to be the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. And I believe that this will save a lot of headache in the future, and it will keep us out of a lot of litigation. And this is what is best for Tullahoma moving forward.
Alderman Berry, you recognize?
MTA's opinion, who, last board meeting, the statement was made by several members of this board that MTA's made a recommendation and we should listen to it. We kind of use MTA's when they agree with us and don't use them when they don't agree. But in the MTA's opinion, the Board of Appeals that is referenced in the annotations in Tennessee Code annotated 137205 through 207 and in the substantive portions of the statutory provisions is the Board of Zoning Appeals. The titles are used interchangeably. In Tennessee Code annotated 13705A1, the statute references the Board of Zoning Appeals. And then in subsection B, the exact same body is referred to as the Board of Appeals. I have attached TCA annotated 137205 from Westlaw for your review. You will see the annotation for the section reads 137205 Board of Appeals, Creation and Composition. That is literally what section 7205 is creating. That's the title. Board of Appeals, Creation, Appointment of, we can say no, but it's literally what it says. It literally says Board of Appeals, Creation, Appointment, I'm reading it straight from Justia. Board of Appeals, Creation, Appointment of Members, Terms, Rules, Governing Organization, Training, and Continuing Education. In the other document that she just read to say that the BOZA does not have the authority, at the very top of that same document, the opinion addresses several questions regarding the Board of Appeals. Because this request is made on behalf of a member of the Board of Commissioners of the City of Lackland, and based on other research, these questions appear to refer to the jurisdiction of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Lakeland. Under Tennessee Code, annotated 137201, the legislative body of a municipality may, through its planning commission, develop a zoning plan and enact a zoning ordinance. Under Tennessee Code, annotated 137205, the chief legislative body of the municipality may create a Board of Zoning Appeals. Section B of the statute provides the chief legislation may provide and specify in its zoning ordinance general rules to govern the organization and procedure and jurisdiction of the Board of Appeals, which rules shall not be inconsistent with the provisions of this part and Part 3 of this chapter, and the Board of Appeals may adopt supplemental procedures of rules of procedure not inconsistent with this part and Part 3 of the chapter general rules. We have an Attorney General's opinion that says the same thing. I'm speaking, we have a quote from the legal consultant at MTAS. We have an opinion from our attorney. We have an opinion from our senior city planner. All of these people with all of this experience, knowledge, background, training, every single one of them says you can't do what you're about to do. But if you want to change the composition of the BOZA, there's a way to do that. But we're telling all these legal people out there, nah, we got somebody on our board who knows better. So here, at the end of the day, we all know, we are all willfully, if you vote yes to this, you are willfully voting yes to something that you know, that you have been told is incorrect, that is not the right way to do this. All our attorney's asking for is a pause, to take a step back and do it the right way. I mean, that doesn't seem like to take a break. But at the end of the day, you're voting for something that you know, that everybody has told you. There's no stepping back and denying and saying, well, I didn't know and I wasn't told. So when the time comes to hold you accountable for the decision that you made, willfully and knowing, and we've already admitted last meeting that it was in retaliation for something that the BOZA did that we didn't agree with here, And don't think that we can go back and change the decision. If you create this board, there's no going back and changing the decision of the BOZA on that church. That's got to be handled in the court. This board, even if you illegally create it, you still can't come back and hear the decision from the BOZA on that church. State law says it's all final. The board doesn't have any power over that. The only way that you can go is through Chancery Court. You're going to do what you're going to do, but we got it on video, and we're going to be able to come back and say, you did the wrong thing. You knew that you did the wrong thing.
Alderman Margot, you recognize?
Okay, so first of all, at the meeting that you're talking about that we can undo, actually, it can be undone because it should be a nullity considering it was against a resolution that this board already previously passed. But that's neither here nor there. That's not why we're here today. So there is a way to challenge this, and it shouldn't come from Ms. Samaniego, and it shouldn't come from our city attorney, who should have an ethical and a fiduciary duty to uphold what it is we do. But yes, you can try to get a declaratory judgment through a writ of certiorari. But here is, again, Mr. Worsham just told us tonight, having a Board of Zoning Appeals is optional. We, again, are not creating a Board of Zoning Appeals. It also says further in the statute that you can create a separate board. It also says in 13205 what the powers of a Board of Zoning Appeals are. In 13207, it specifically says what the powers of the Board of Appeals are in 207 and the powers of the Board of Zoning Appeals are in 205. It does delineate between the two boards. We were with company in a training when it was taught to us, because I made the exact same argument you just did 6 months ago, and I was corrected. And here is why. Currently, our Board of Zoning Appeals, whether it stays or it goes, does not have the authority that we are granting to this Board of Appeals. And because of that authority, those people need to be accountable to the citizens through a vote, plain and simple. And there is no need to have two boards that do the same thing. And having a Board of Zoning Appeals is optional. This is not a Board of Zoning Appeals. This is a separate board that does one amongst others of the functions of the Board of Zoning Appeals that was optional. So this is the best way, fight me all you want to, this is the best way to get the business of the city done and the fairest way to do it. How many in here think that our city codes are flawless and completely fair? Yeah, no hands. It's going to take boards and boards and boards for us to get our sign codes to where it need to be. Mr. Worsham talked about having 3 different sections of our code where we have 3 different sets of rules. Our codes overlap. Our charter and our codes are inconsistent. We have too many rules. We have too much regulation, and you are correct. We do need to have some development, and we need to have our staff. We can't ask them to bend the rules. They have to go by the rules that we give them, right? But we, as the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, can determine, as this says, requests for special exceptions or for interpretation for decisions upon other special questions, okay? We can determine whether carrying out or enforcement of a rule is against the essential functions of fairness. We have the authority to determine that, and it come before us in the public and not be done behind closed doors, and to make this city a fair place to live, to reside, to work, to build, and to play in. And that is what we are here to do. And I have no idea why anybody on this board would not want us to be fair.
Alderman Berry, you're recognized again.
Does anybody else have anything before? I can't make sense of it in my head, how somebody can read 13.7.205 and 13.207 and see a delineation between the two. Like, I just can't wrap my head around and make that jump. It's silly, folks. You're making us look silly up here. You know what powers the BOZA has? The BOZA has every single power listed in 13-7-207. You know why? Because that's what state law says, and it's sitting right here in front of you. And I know that I'm talking to brick walls. I do want things to be fair, and I do understand that this can be taken into court, and I've already talked to attorneys, and that's where this will go. This will go to court, and they talked about the affected parties, and I'm an affected party because I am sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of being a part of a board. We passed a resolution that we shouldn't have passed. This ordinance, every legal opinion out, every single legal qualified actual attorney out there is telling us you can't do it. Same with the resolution. We are just making things up by the seat of our pants, guys. And I do want things to be fair. But fair is not when somebody doesn't do something that you like, changing the rules in the middle of the game. That's not fair. That's not. It's not what you ran. I'm done. This will go to court. We'll vote.
There's no further comments. Before we vote, I want to just simply read one thing. I think this summarizes all the documentation we've got here, but it comes from Alicia Hodge, who's our legal consultant that presented this to us. And it says simply, based on the provisions set forth above, as you've outlined, the Tullahoma Board of Mayor and Alderman does not have the authority to create a Board of Appeals to bypass the Board of Zoning Appeals. That's the way it's summarized by a legal consultant. We're ready to vote.
Okay.
Three noes and 4 yeses. Passed by majority vote. Moving right along. Under unfinished business, resolution number 1941, a resolution renaming South Wall Street Alley to Eugene London Street. Need a motion. Motion by Barry, seconded by Mathis. In discussion.
Thank you for doing this, Kurt. Great addition to this.
You're welcome. Well deserved.
If it's with the board's permission, I'd just like to read the proclamation that we'll be presenting to them.
Okay, great.
For the benefit of those who are listening. A resolution designating a certain roadway in Tullahoma is Eugene London Street, and this is Eugene London Sr. Whereas the city of Tullahoma, Tennessee recognizes the contribution of Eugene London Sr. for his 50 years of loyal and dedicated service to the Tullahoma community as a sports icon in his many positions. And whereas Eugene London Sr. was inducted into Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame in 2006 and Tullahoma Sports Hall of Fame in 2022. Whereas Mr. London served as a member of the United States Army and later the Tennessee National Guard, and whereas the street names may be changed from time to time, but the Tullahoma Municipal Code and his recommendation is hereby made to the Board of Mayor and Alderman, the city now be it resolved by the city of Tullahoma that a Board of Mayor and Alderman wishes to recognize the contribution of Eugene London by renaming South Wall Street to Eugene London Street, and that the affected addresses will be notified through the 911 emergency, and the change of the date will take place the reading after the vote tonight. So be it further resolved by the Board of Mayor and Alderman, City of Tullahoma, this resolution will be in full force and effect the day of the passage of public welfare requiring it. So with that, with no further discussion, we'll vote yes. Or we'll vote yes. Everybody vote yes to rename a street for an icon, a sports icon in our city. It passes 7-0. Great individual. Had an opportunity to work with Eugene London, CSSAA for a number of years. Some guy. Moving on to new business. We'll start with ordinance number 1996, an ordinance to amend the zoning ordinance of the City of Tullahoma, which is ordinance number 1992 by amending Article 4, specific district regulations, Section 405, microbrewer use in the restricted manufacturing and warehousing as in zoning district I-1 for the passage on first of two readings. It's to establish microbrewers in I-1. Any discussion? Second, vote by Barry, seconded by Hallmacher. Ready to vote? Passes 7-0 for microbrewers. Resolution number 1942, resolution approving the classification and compensation for the city employees. That's details are on 92. Get a motion on the floor. Motion by Barry, seconded by Mann. With that, I'd like to yield the floor to the city administrator for the background.
Over the last, since last year when we were asked to put this study together, we went through many meetings with our consultant, the finance director, myself, and Human Resources Department worked together to make sure that these classifications were correct. Worked really hard to make sure that they had the right job descriptions and everybody was acclimated to the right position they were in. After months of negotiation and talk with our consultant, he came up with this compensation plan, which, for the pay structure, market comparison, we should be between 95 and 105%. Come to find out that over 50% of our people were under 88%, and over 25% were under 83%. This compensation plan will alleviate that situation and hopefully be in a better market area for our development. One of the things that the acting human resource director noticed that we've lost 88 employees over the last 3 years. That's quite a few different onboarding and offboarding employees. That takes a lot of extra effort, a lot of extra work to train those people. Extra cost to the city. People don't have training, so we feel like this compensation plan will be a good step in the right direction, hopefully alleviate that.
Any further discussion on the board? Almager?
What department has the highest turnover right now? Where do we need to make the most gains?
Police. Highest police, and then probably Public Works. Yep.
Good to know.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? And that's in the impact, that impact is included in our budget.
Yes.
$729,000 included in the budget. Okay, ready to vote? Passes 7-0. Item number 23107, request to renew the annual local government corporation hardware maintenance agreement and citywide financial software in the amount of $59,616 for fiscal year 2004. Details on that are on page 99. Need a motion. Motion by Barry, seconded by Glick. Any discussion? Ready to vote? Passes 7-0.
Great job on that, Kenny.
Item number 23108, approve a one-year renewal of an agreement with Household and Artman to perform audit services of the City of Tullahoma for the City School and Tullahoma Industrial Development Board and the Airport Authority and the Tullahoma Area Economic Development Corporation in a total amount of $49,800 for FY23. Motion by Barry, second by Glick. Any discussion from any details you need to provide on that, city administrator? It's a routine that they've been doing it for a while.
It's just a routine.
Ready to vote? And that passes 7-0. Item number 23-109, consider approval of TDEC ARP Stormwater Non-Collaborative Grant in the amount of $2,370,558 and authorize the mayor to sign the contract. Details are on 105. City, the motion from Barry, seconded by Mathis. Details on that from our city administrator.
I'd like to turn that over to Butch.
This is something that I've been working on for probably about a year. This is a ARP TDEC binder. This is not all the paperwork that goes along with this grant. These are projects that we initiated back, like I said, about a year ago. We have not ever had a plan, a stormwater master plan. My engineering budget every year does not cover anywhere close to any of that. So this is a good opportunity on this grant to go after some of these, just have a master plan, a couple of smaller plans, studies for certain areas of the city, and to go after a couple of projects that folks have been to this board to ask about. So we got the grant after a lot of time and effort been put into it. So I'm hoping the board will approve it. The money, the matching money has been already approved at some point back on the ARP. I don't know when that date was, but hopefully we can get this moving. It's something needed, so we can have a plan going forward with projects, capital projects. So hopefully the board will.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Any further discussion? Ready to vote? Approved 7-0. Next item, 23-110, confirm the appointment of John West as recommended by the interim city administrator to our interlocal solid waste authority, ISWA board, for a 6-year appointment term ending in July 2029. The motion from Barry, seconded by Mann. And again, routine appointment that certainly the city administrator has approved, so ready to vote. Passes 7-0. 23-111, consider approval using TDOT maintenance contract paving funds to fix a deteriorating lane on North Jackson Street and allocate the remaining $65,782.11 to the project. All these funds will be reimbursed to the city once the work is completed. This is an agreement we have with TDOT where we don't do the work and they reimburse us for the cost. Any discussion? Ready to vote? Passes 7-0. Item 23-112, consider request to authorize Parks and Rec departments to apply for a $10,000 ATAEP grant with 50% local match. And details of that are on 139. Motion by Barry, seconded by Wilson. Can I yield to city administrator for the details on that?
This is this grant has already been applied for. It was brought to my attention and by JP. We went ahead and looked at it. Since it's already been applied for, I didn't want to just show that we're going to apply for it, because we have applied for it. It is a $10,000 TAEP grant with a 50% local match required. Something that Lyle had pushed to get, and I do apologize that it wasn't approved beforehand.
It's within your spending limit, though. So,
Yeah.
okay.
I appreciate you calling that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, appreciate the information, though.
Ready to vote? Passes 7-0. Item number 23-113, consider the approval of purchase of equipment from Game Time. That's in the amount of $13,905.39 to complete the dog park dash grant. We've already got part of it going. Details on 144. Motion from Barry, seconded by Mathis. And again, I'll go to the city administrator for details.
Again, this has already been purchased. This was the remaining amount from our $25,000 grant that was from this for the dog park dash grant. We had $25,000. We didn't realize, Lyle didn't realize that y'all didn't approve the whole $25,000 to be spent. Y'all approved $11,000 back this past about October that they passed that. They went ahead and finished off spending the money from that grant. So this has been purchased as well. So just wanted to make sure that everybody knew where the money was going.
Thank you for the details. Ready to vote?
Now, this wasn't from the current Parks and Rec administration. This was from the previous Parks and Rec administration.
Yes, that's correct.
Also previous to you, right?
Yeah, previous to me as well.
So this is somewhere along the lines of the CD stamps, Jim Floor. I just wanted to point out that you weren't responsible, or Mr. Kraft.
Ready to vote? Ready to vote? And that passes 7-0. Item number 23-114, consider request to add the historic overlay districts that were previously created on the official zoning maps to find out the vacancies and fill the vacancies on the Historic Zoning Commission. The details of that are page 106, and a fair amount of details that came to you over the weekend for the zoning. Need a motion on the floor? Got a motion from Glick, seconded by Wilson. And Alderman Glick, you're recognized.
I brought this item before the board because we discovered this in deliberations on the CPDC and creating the new community plan. And it was saw that there is an existing ordinance, and I want to clear that up right now. This is not a request to start an ordinance or a request for a new ordinance creating a new commission. This is an ordinance that is on the books of the city of Tullahoma that is not being followed. So I brought it before this board so that we can correct that and follow our own rules. I believe that the city code of ordinance, the ordinances in there are the laws. We are not following the law that we created for ourselves, so we need to either follow that law or we need to decide the correct way not to follow it would be to just end it and vote it out. Now, it could be amended, and maybe that could be the proper way to go about it. I know there's a lot of things in there that have that were changed over the years. When I was working for the city, the Historic Zoning Commission was active, and I know that some things were kind of changed as time went on. So, you know, we either need to enact it exactly as written, delete it totally, or we need to amend it to suit the current needs of the city. But the proper way to deal with the ordinance is not to just ignore it and act like it doesn't exist. So I request that we take action on this item.
What exactly does this involve?
The there are certain historic overlay districts that were created by this ordinance. It's in this material. There's the Depot District and certain districts, and that have a separate kind of historical character. And the law is, or the ordinance is, set forth to create a historic zoning commission that looks out for the historic structures in these areas. Now, I think that a lot of the stuff might already be gone, or it might need to be amended, because this was from 20 years ago. So, but I do think that it is worthwhile to have some kind of historic protection of facilities or buildings or areas that are significant and that can be agreed upon, that are significant to our history. Because if we don't have the historical look back and the character of our town, you know, it's our growth going forward is going to be wrong. So,
How will this affect businesses as they are now? How do we, I mean, will they have any input at all?
I think they would, and it says here in this, I don't think that the Historical Zoning Commission has that much power. All the power is reverted to the Regional Planning Commission and then, I guess, the Board of Mayor and Alderman. But it says right here that nothing in this section shall be interpreted as giving the Historical Zoning Commission any authority to consider, review, examine, or control the use of property classified as historic zoning district. Use shall be controlled solely by the zoning controlling each such property prior to its classification as a historic district, or may be rezoned by subsequent amendments. So that's what it says that the Historic Zoning Commission can do. I throw it out there. I am not for more regulation. I'm for less regulation. But the way to go about that is not to ignore a law that we have on the books. We need to deal with that, or else it's just sitting out there waiting to pop up at any time, and someone could fill the commission that doesn't have as broad a view of it as maybe we do, or we don't have the same thing. So
Alderman Albacher.
Yes, okay, so I appreciate the fact that Ms. Bowling and Mr. Glick found using the CPDC to look for discrepancies within our code and our land use classifications and everything, because these are things that I do believe Mr. Glick has a point we do need to address. However, I do want to delineate that last paragraph that he read, the land use classifications. I think that even though when we interpret the word use loosely as you can do with it what you want, I think what it's referring to is, in a planning perspective, land use as Mary might designate on the map, that the Historic Zoning Commission would not be able to rezone or dictate how the land is being used based on the land use classifications. So what does worry me is the general description and purposes. If you look on page 148, where it says to preserve and protect the historic and or architectural value of buildings from encroachment of surrounding uses, to regulate exterior design, arrangement, texture, materials, to create an aesthetic experience, to stabilize and improve property values, to foster civic beauty, to strengthen the local economy, and to promote the use of historic districts for education. So I kind of have a problem with the historic districts, not necessarily the historic commission or certain sites being designated for protection, like CD stamps. given its history, or the Red Cross building, perhaps TFAC or South Jackson Civic Center even, may be buildings that we want to designate as historic and in order to preserve and possibly qualify for grants. However, I would not want to do any of that for any building unless the executive director, and if it's a private owner, the private owner signed on to this. I don't want to sign somebody up for something that they don't want to be a part of. And the way this overlay looks, you don't know what buildings are protected and what buildings aren't protected. It's almost too broad. And I'm going to name drop because he said that I could. Cameron Newton called me today very concerned about something like this, considering he is restoring a lot of the downtown, and he's about to start the second phase of a 4-phase project that he's millions of dollars into, and how this might affect him and whatever this board does do. While there may be no regulations right now, would there be regulations in the future that could affect his plans already laid in progress? And so I think that this needs to be consolidated down. I'm fine with us designating buildings that we own, and we want to, preserve those. But if it is privately owned, they need to be able to opt into this. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'll wait till my second turn to speak, but I'm probably going to make a motion to postpone is what I'm thinking, just to give the public more time to comment on this.
Alderman Berry.
Yes, some of this I just find rich about the rules not being followed. We're not following our own rules, or I don't know how you can't help but laugh at that. But so the part that he was talking about, they don't have the authority, that is saying they don't have the authority to zone. When you dig into this, what it does say is powers and duties of the Historical Zoning Commission. It shall be the duty of the Historic Zoning Commission to make the following determination with respect to historic districts. Appropriateness of altering or demolishing any building or structure within the historic district. So when you're looking at these, it's not a matter of which building in here, it's the whole district, right? So it's every building that's inside that overlay. The commission may require exterior photographs, architectural measured drawings of the exterior, or other notations of architectural features to be used for historical documentation as a condition of any recommendation to demolish a building or structure. The appropriateness of exterior architectural features, including signs or other exterior fixtures of any new buildings or structures to be constructed within the historical district. The appropriateness of front yards, side yards, rear yards, off-street parking spaces, location of entrance drives into the property, sidewalks along the public right-of-way, which may affect the character of any building or structure within the historic district. The general exterior design, arrangement, texture, material, color of the building, or other structure in question in relation of such factors as similar features of the buildings in the immediate surroundings. However, the Historic Zoning Commission shall not consider interior arrangements. So it's what they can see from the outside, right? It shall also be the responsibility to review all proposed nominations for National Register of Historic Places, which is more what you were talking about, is individual places, right? You have the authority to conduct surveys of local historical and cultural resources that will maintain a list of districts. They have the authority to request the Board of Mayor and Alderman staff's reasonable fees in regard to applications of certificates. Right of entry upon land. The commission, its members, employees, and the performance of work may enter upon any land within jurisdiction and make examinations and surveys. What we shouldn't be, here's my point, is we shouldn't be talking about what the motion should be tonight is, fine, if we want to look at historical zoning, we already got it on the ordinances, let's revise this.
That is the ordinance.
I understand.
You were reading, that. If that's not the ordinance I was proposing, that is the
let me
ordinance
finish.
that's on the
This
book.
says, Daniel Berry, you have the
finishing.
floor. So what I'm suggesting is that what should be discussed tonight is how do we amend and change this ordinance, because one of the qualifications of a member is they cannot have any interest whatsoever in any of the overlays in here. So we're going to appoint a body of people who have no interest financially to gain in any of the property, to let them tell these property owners what they can and cannot do. It's already the ordinance. We should be changing this ordinance, not saying, let's do it.
Alderman Glick, your record.
That Mr. Berry, that's exactly why I brought this forward, is I didn't agree with everything it said in there, and that's what I said earlier. I brought it forward because it is the ordinance that's on the books, and we are not following it. I'm not saying that we should. I'm saying that we shouldn't. I agree with you. But it is the ordinance that's on the books. If we're not following and so it's the law. So we're not following our own laws by doing this, right? By not doing it.
We always do that.
Well, we need to remedy that situation. So, yeah, I think that the whole ordinance needs to be looked at, and with a lot of public input from everybody that's interested in putting in comments on it. And what would the proper steps be to, Mr. Worsham, I'm asking you, what will the proper steps be to replace this ordinance? Would it be just creating another ordinance to replace it?
I think we can amend, this is in the code, somewhere in the code, I think we can amend that, and we would do that by ordinance. Ordinances that create things also have to be amended by ordinance, so we should do that. But I definitely think, it's no surprise that we don't follow some of our ordinances, because we don't follow a lot of them. As you well know, we didn't deny it earlier. And I think we ought to look at this carefully and amend it, because it does have an impact on people, and a financial impact that may be egregious to them, frankly. So we don't follow it, and obviously we don't follow it because we didn't see any necessity to follow it, or it wasn't the right thing to do in the first place.
Well, is the proper way to deal with that to ignore it and just not follow it, or
Well, just study it. No, study it and amend it, or do away with it, or repeal it if we don't think it's of any value. We can do all those things.
Well,
But
that's
we're not
what,
following it now. I don't suggest we follow it, because I think there are provisions in that we really don't want to follow.
City
So
Administrator
I think
recognized.
postponing it and perhaps submitting it to the appropriate body for review would be well taken if you do that. Maybe the Planning Commission, if y'all think that'd be the appropriate body to look at that.
Mr. Mayor, could we get Ms. Samaniego to weigh in on this?
That's what I was going to ask. We have the senior planner talk a little bit about it, and she can tell you how we can amend this and
Ms.
change
Samaniego,
some
you
things.
recognize.
We could actually bring some stuff to the board, some ideas, so that y'all could look at it and then make a decision how you want to go about it, which might be the best way, so she can go ahead and get it put into where it needs to be. Mary?
Thank you, Mary Samaniego. Yeah, so the procedure is that, I'm trying to catch up here. My understanding was that Mr. Alderman Glick put us on the agenda, just asked to appoint people to the Historic Zoning Commission. And if the residents are appointed to the Historic Zoning Commission, then they are going to start enacting the Historic Preservation Ordinance, which is in the zoning ordinance as it's currently written. So if you appoint members, once they're appointed, they're off and running, and they're administrating that code as written. The districts are established, the protocol for what they review anything that's built or demolished within any of those districts. So if you don't feel comfortable with that, the appropriate procedure would be to amend those regulations in the Historic Preservation Ordinance, which is part of the zoning ordinance, so it would have to go to the Planning Commission. Furthermore, it'd be good planning practices to actually have a public forum on this entire issue, to get public feedback, to get kind of a barometer, if you will, feel if the community's interested in doing this. I know that they were interested, obviously, in doing it back in 2005 when it was established, but that was 18 years ago. I can say it's not a matter of that staff isn't, or the city isn't following the ordinance. It's that the Historic Preservation Ordinance is administered by this committee. This committee went dormant. So I, as the planning director, can't administer the code without a board. It's under the authority of that board. And if nobody is serving on that board, there's nothing.
Well, it's this board that was supposed to appoint people to that commission, and they never did it. So
I just want to clarify for the record, it's not that.
I don't think anybody would, I wasn't saying that you weren't doing your job.
I just want to clarify that point.
No,
So, yeah, the appropriate planning procedure is to have some public meetings, see what the interest is, possibly rewrite the zoning provisions under what the duties and what is going to be reviewed under the Historic Preservation Committee, probably adopt some design guidelines so it's clear what type of criteria per district are being reviewed for. We can send that all to the state, the SHPO, which is the State Historic Preservation Office, or we can adopt the Secretary of Interior Design Standards for Historic Preservation, and then you establish a committee, and then it's operating. I mean, the Historic Preservation Committee. I can say in 2 of my previous jobs, I enacted and started a Historic Preservation Board, so I'm familiar with this process.
Thank you, Ms. Cindy. Have we got any questions for the city director? Alderman, you recognized?
At this time, I think the thing that's going to give us the most calm at the end of the day is to go ahead and I make a motion to repeal Section 408 in its entirety, but to instruct city staff to schedule a public forum meeting to discuss the interest of having such a commission and how that should be done.
Need a second? You have a motion?
It's not up here.
We have a motion. Alderman Almacher.
I have a point of information. I'm 100% on board with repealing this, but can we just repeal an ordinance in this manner through I don't think we can. I think we have to go through a process to.
Well, then we can put that on the next agenda, the repealing while we are, I think it's good to just start with a clean slate.
If you'll accept a friendly amendment to your motion, to postpone this until such time as we have repealed this ordinance.
Well, okay, I still think, okay. I move to postpone while we work on efforts of repealing this in its entirety and scheduling a public forum to discuss what it should look like if it should be here at all.
We have a motion. I need a second, then we'll get to it.
You got it.
Got a motion from second by Alderman Mathis. I'm glad
Can
you're
you-
recognized.
Oh, I'd like for Ms. Almacher to repeat what her motion
Okay,
was.
so it's a postponing while we get it on the schedule to repeal it in its entirety for the time being. So we're making steps, well, no, I don't want to postpone indefinitely because then you don't.
Yeah, you just put an item on the agenda.
I think there's an expectation that this will come back to us after a public forum. So postpone, we're looking at repealing, whether or not there's public sentiment to have this. We're going to start with this clean slate, in other words. Move to postpone while we work towards efforts to put it back on the agenda as a repealing
Or amending.
or amending, if we so choose, for the next agenda, and to schedule a public forum considering public interest.
We got a motion and a second, then Alderman Glick, you're recognized.
I think what the motion ended up being about what I'd be interested in is just not take any action on appointing any kind of commission or anything like that until public forums are contained to gain, follow me if I'm following what
Right.
you're doing, until Ms. Sammiego has time to schedule public forums to gauge the interest of the public as to the historic commissions and what the regulations would be to replace this, or if it would be just to repeal it in its entirety.
Yeah, may I, so the reason I said it the way I did is because even if we amend it, I feel like with the issues, we're gonna end up needing a clean slate. So even if we're not ready to amend, we can go ahead and repeal. That way we don't have, like you said, an ordinance on the books that's not being used. if that makes sense. And if I'm confusing somebody,
It's essentially a motion to repeal with caveats for going forward.
I think we got a line for him at the podium.
Ms. San Diego, you're recognized.
Thank you. I invited myself back up here. I just want to clarify for the record that the historic preservation provisions and ordinance are all part of the zoning ordinance, so this all has to go through the planning commission as well. So the board doesn't have the authority to directly repeal out of the zoning ordinance without first going before the planning commission.
sure.
Okay.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Alderman Barry, you're recognized.
Yeah, I think we just really complicated that. I think that we can just all vote no to the original motion and just be done, right? And then ask the city administrator to get with the city planner and bring it before the planning commission to have this repealed and go through that process, right? Yeah, but with this just all got really confusing. We can just vote no and this be done. And
What
they
was
know
the original motion?
your original thing was this
Well, that was
agenda
the
item.
agenda item.
Right, well, that's the motion. When you make a motion on an item, that's the motion, is what you have in the item, was to take appropriate action to add historical overlay, create it, and to fill the vacancies. So my suggestion would be, let's just vote no on the original. And then I'm pretty sure everyone is clear on our intent to repeal, go through that process and and if you're not, now you are. That would be my recommendation. I think we just because I don't understand this one. We can't make a motion to repeal an ordinance. We can't do that.
We're not repealing, this is to work towards that, since it does have to go for the planning commission. We're instructing staff what to do next so that it keeps the ball rolling. That's all we're doing.
Yeah, I would say let's vote no to the postpone and then come back and vote no to the other. And that just makes everything easy. And we're done.
You're recognized, Mr. Worsham.
I think that what Mr. Bear said is the appropriate way to do it. We don't necessarily want to repeal it. We can take the existing ordinance and amend it, but we need to go through the proper process to do this. I think that Mr. Bear's suggestion is well taken.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to see.
Let's just vote no to the postpone and vote no to the motion. And kick it to planning.
I mean, isn't that the same thing? We can vote twice or we can vote once here. So we're doing the same thing. No, we don't. If we vote for the motion to postpone, then we do everything we just said we were doing.
When we vote to postpone, then it's still just on the table, right? So.
Yeah, it's still on the table. We want it to come back to us eventually. Isn't that the point?
No, you're voting to have, when you postpone this, you are postponing this item. We do not want this item to come back to us, right? We want something entirely different to come back to us. That's what a postpone.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the amendment is.
Let's just.
Whatever you guys want to do. I will withdraw my motion. Let's just vote on the item.
Let's go. Let's do it. Jeez. There you go.
For everyone, could our city recorder, do you even know what we're voting on? You're clear on that. Would you state what we're voting on?
We're voting on the original amendment, or the original item number.
We're voting to
As
approve
it was on the
to
agenda.
approve, to delete the ordinance
No.
or postpone the ordinance.
The original motion was to request that the Board of Mayor and Alderman take the appropriate action to add the historic overlay districts that were previously created to the official zoning map and to fill the vacancies on the Historic Zoning Commission. That's what we're voting on.
Yes or no?
Yes or no?
Well, that's a miracle. But we, understand. We do have one more item. That did fail by a majority vote. And we have one more item to discuss, an item that was added by Alderman Almacher. What'd you bring? Sure.
Where'd this come from? Oh, okay.
Alderman Howard, you had an added, agenda item added.
Yes.
You want to state your proposal?
I need a second, I guess, first.
Your motion fails for lack of a second.
Does it fail for lack of a second? They made a second earlier.
Nope, that was to put it on the agenda.
We're,
Okay, I think they're confused.
No, that's
I'm
not,
Motion-
we don't
motion
have it on
failed
our
for lack-
tablet.
They don't have it on their
didn't.
tablet.
It's on mine.
Well, it is now.
It's been on mine for a while.
I did, motion
Okay,
failed for
are
lack
we,
of a
do I
second.
have a second? Because I think they were confused.
Oh, God.
There was no second. Failed for lack of a second.
there was a second.
There was a second. Bobby's saying she hit the button.
Well, all I can see is what I gave. I have a motion to request an executive session, and you want it done according to your schedule. And I'll tell you that the schedule will be contingent upon the availability of the lawyers involved.
Am I recognized, Mr. Mayor?
You recognize?
So I agree that the scheduling is contingent upon the availability of the lawyers. However, we had this on the agenda at the last meeting, which, given we kind of had an extra week, was almost, I mean, this has been quite a while ago. It feels like a while since I've seen you guys. There was 5 weeks in the last month, so we got an extra week off. So approximately 3 weeks ago, we had this on the agenda. We took it off of the agenda to call an executive session with Bob Burns and Associates because they replied to us and scheduled an executive session. Yes, they did. They scheduled it for today. And so the reason that this is just now coming before us today is because it was canceled on Thursday, past the deadline for adding this to the agenda. So we were on their timeline. They scheduled this with us. We haven't met with them, and we had other lawyers, not just them, we had other lawyers also arrange their schedule in order to meet with us at the same time so we could get brought up to speed on all cases. And we were relying upon these lawyers to keep their commitment. And we, I guess I can't say we, maybe there's one of us who have heard more, but essentially none of us have been updated on any of these cases, any of the litigation in the city in the past. I'm going on a little over 9 months. 9 months since we have had a sit-down meeting with these attorneys. And I have been less than impressed with some of their tactics. In fact, I believe that they are possibly causing us more liability and more harm than necessary because they have refused to update us on their tactics. And this goes for not just one of the lawyers, but potentially another set on, I would like to know more about another settlement that I have just found out that we are in. And it's not that lawyer's fault because he's not the one who canceled. To be clear, this is about Bob Burns and Associates for canceling their commitment when they have not met with us or spoken to us in 9 months during litigation, during active litigation. That is unacceptable. It is unacceptable to this board. It is unacceptable by the standards and the rules of the professional conduct for any lawyer to go that long without speaking to their client. And I want to draw your attention to the back. I didn't print, there are 95 pages of the rules of professional conduct. I printed off the first 10 and had quite a bit to highlight that I had concerns about. If you go to Rule 1.4, which is on the second to last page, a lawyer shall promptly inform the client of any decision or circumstance with respect to which the client's informed consent as defined in RPC 1.0E is required by these rules. Reasonably consult with the client about the means by which the client's objectives are to be accomplished. Keep the client reasonably informed about the status of the matter. Promptly comply with reasonable requests for information. Consult with the client about any relevant limitation on the lawyer's conduct when the lawyer knows that the client expects assistance not permitted by the rules of professional conduct. And a lawyer shall explain a matter to the extent reasonably necessary to permit the client to make informed decisions regarding the representation. Reasonable communication between the lawyer and the client is necessary for the client to effectively to participate in the representation. If you go on to the second page, let's say that we haven't disagreed with any of their tactics they have chosen to use. It simply says that disagreements between a lawyer and a client about those means must be worked out by the lawyer and the client within a framework defined by the law of agency. The right of the client to discharge the lawyer and the right of the lawyer to withdraw from the representation. We don't even know what they're doing, when they're doing it, if we agree with what they're doing. We haven't been told anything. And so to not have a meeting in 9 months, or to request a meeting with your client in 9 months, and then to finally get one, and they're the ones who schedule it, we schedule around them, and then they cancel it, that is unacceptable. So yes, do I expect that they reschedule that in the next 48 hours? They've known about this for 9 months, and they knew about it for at least 3 weeks, that they had a commitment to keep. And I believe there are nefarious reasons as to why they may have canceled such. All I'm asking for, whether I'm a part of that meeting or not, is that this board as a whole get updated not only on that litigation, but on any others from any lawyers that we have. This is unacceptable, and I believe that we need to make a statement, and we can't do that in executive session because we can't vote. We have to do that in a formal board meeting to let these individuals know that we are displeased. It has to be done formally, and that is the reason for this.
We have a motion from Barry, seconded by Wilson. Alderman Barry, you recognize?
Mayor, it is my understanding that Public Entity Partners is our insurance company. Is that correct? And we are Public Entity Partners' client. We're not a client of Howe and Fisher. The public, and correct me if I'm wrong, how this works, the chain here, while Howe and Fisher may be working for Public Entity Partners, PEP is their client. We are not directly Howe and Fisher's client, right?
That's incorrect.
Hang on a second. So Judge Steger, I may have mispronounced his name, in your federal hearing said, but the thing you should be aware of is that the insurance company gets to dictate what its insurance counsel does to represent a client, us being PEP's client. And if you interfere with the insurance company, of whom we are a client, you may void your coverage. Ms. Almacher, yes, the court. And so, if Mr. Glick hits the city for $500,000 instead of the insurance company paying it, the taxpayers of Tullahoma will pay it. So the chain of this, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I am not an attorney, is you have the city of Tullahoma, our provider is PEP, right? And so we are their client. And then PEP can hire, we don't get to make decisions in our lawsuit, right? We can influence, and we can say, hey, we'd really like for you guys to do this, or we'd really like for you guys to do that, but they don't have to do anything they want or anything that we ask, right? Because we pay them a deductible, they hire counsel to keep them from, I guess, having to pay, right? That's how insurance works. So in the chain, and everybody probably can't see us, this is the city of Tullahoma. This is Public Entity Partners. We are their client. That's our. So if we want to make a request, technically, I would think that it would need to go to PEP, right? I would think. Instead of directly going to Howe and Fisher, who their customer, their client, is actually PEP. Indirectly, the city of Tullahoma, but we're not their client. PEP is their client, and PEP gets to dictate what Howe and Fisher does. And so I feel that if we want to make demands, then we need to make demands with PEP. PEP, but I also think that having an alderman sitting up here accusing, like literally saying that the insurance company representing us in a case against another alderman is up to nefarious deeds. I think there's something wrong with that.
Alderman Marker, you recognize?
The rules of professional conduct apply to any fiduciary duty that a lawyer owes any client or third-party representation, which would include the city of Tullahoma. The rules of professional conduct do apply to the lawyer in their dealings with us, and while PEP may agree or disagree with whatever they choose to do, ultimately, it is our determination and our decision as to whether we agree or want to continue that representation with PEP or with this attorney at whatever means. Maybe we don't want to. Maybe we do want to. But nonetheless, we still are their client for all intents and purposes, because you know when it says so-and-so represented by so-and-so versus so-and-so, we are represented by the law firm. And therefore, they owe us a fiduciary duty. A fiduciary duty, and that third-party representation is also laid out within the preamble and the scope of the rules of professional conduct. That doesn't give them the pass on failing to communicate with us just because they are actually paid by an insurance carrier. They absolutely do have to represent the best interests of the city of Tullahoma, and they owe us a fiduciary duty, that which they have failed to uphold by the lack of communication. Yes, the rules apply, and yes, the Board of Professional Responsibility will take this very seriously.
Alderman Wilson.
When I was elected onto the board, there were pending lawsuits against the city in which I wasn't up to speed on. We had an executive session, I believe it was maybe end of August, September maybe, in which we discussed some cases that were pending. We have not met again to be brought up to speed on any. There are new cases that I was unaware of that is pending, that I actually had to Google and read about in the newspaper. And I think that we need to be, we need to have an executive session in which I thought that we all had it arranged. And I think that if the law firm cancels at the last minute, they should at least have the courtesy, professional courtesy, of telling us a time that we could reschedule this. You know, we all need to be kept up to speed on the city litigation. So I think that it's reasonable to expect for one, I don't believe that it was professional courtesy to cancel, but if it was necessary, we should have some options about when we can have another one. And I'm not hearing that. I'm not hearing that coming from anyone. It's just, it shouldn't be good enough that they just cancel and it's over. We need to know what's going on with some of these lawsuits. It's ludicrous that we hear about it from outside the city, and we don't even know what's going on.
It's Alderman Mann.
Just one question, and this is honestly because I don't know. You read from a transcript just a minute ago from the Chattanooga courts, correct? Mm-hmm. Where did you get that transcript?
So none of us should be walking around ignorant, because there's this site called Pacer Monitor.
Pacer. So you got that
and
on
so
Pacer.
I follow everything that the city's tracking, right? So I'm never surprised by lawsuits that come here,
Is
or
that
where the
transcript on
status,
Pacer?
Thank you.
or
Excuse
where
me.
the status of those are.
That's just what I wanted to know, that you got that off Pacer. I've been here 6 months, and I'll just share my experience. 6 months, we received an update. I believe it was my first meeting, and it was to update us on a different case that's now been resolved, and that's it. Since then, unfortunately, and Alderman Glick's case with the city has become political, right? It's brought up at these board meetings. It's been brought up at least 2, maybe 3 of the past 2 months, 3 months of board meetings. We get asked questions about this. Yes, we can certainly look it up on Pacer, and that's a great tool. But still, to hear from our attorneys, to give us some guidance, some direction, some kind of update, I think would be great. So I reached out to Mr. Worsham and I said, can I talk to our attorneys instead of waiting on them to get with us? And he said, yes, just give them a call. I did. This has been about a month or so ago. I gave them a call. I've left 2 voicemails. I called not only Mr. Burns, but Mr. Evans as well, who I believe is working on the same case. I didn't get a response until today. I reached out to Mr. Worsham on Friday when I saw this cancellation. And I would have been fine. I understand you get busy. I would have been fine with no response. Didn't care for it, but I knew they were coming to give us an update at this executive session. So when that got canceled on Friday, I reached out to Mr. Worsham. He said that he would reach out to them, and he did today. And they did try and reach out to me shortly before the board meeting. I was at the office until about 3:30 when I go home to change for the board meeting, and evidently that's when they called. So I do see the frustration because I've had it. You know, we hear these things brought up, and I think anytime someone new, whether it be the aldermen that were elected in the last election, myself, who was appointed in January, there should be some kind of update. I will say that the other attorneys in other cases, they did provide us with a short email update, you know, on a couple of the cases. That was helpful. If Mr. Burns and company had to cancel, things happen, they could have maybe done that, but we didn't even get that. And like Alderman Wilson said, we didn't even get a date when this will happen. So I think, you know, for me, I would like to see some sort of executive session where we can ask questions, where we can hear back, where we can get informed about this case and others. And I would like to see it rather soon, since I believe it was on, and I had this pulled up, it was on the 30th of May that Mr. Burns was good with June 12th at 4 p.m. That was on the 30th of May. We got a cancellation this past Friday, which would have been, the 9th, I believe. And so there was plenty of time to reschedule, to let us know, hey, there's a problem, but we got it at the last minute. The agenda's already out. I hate seeing items added to the agenda during the meeting, but we didn't get this information until the agenda was out, literally right after the agenda came out. So, you know, that's just my experience with this so far, and I hope we'd consider doing something so we can get an update in executive session from our attorneys.
Alderman Berry.
Also, you can purchase any of the federal cases, transcripts. I think it was $35. So I encourage you guys to track things on Pacer Monitor if you are actually curious. Yes, I like executive sessions as well, but a lot of times I'll read something on Pacer and then I'll give our attorney a call and say, hey, can you explain this to me? So I think that, you know, some of it is, it's incumbent upon us to do our research and get the questions right. If you sat around for 9 months and we're in the dark, that's on you. I'm not going to talk anybody out of the voting yes to this. I talked about a nail last meeting in the coffin, and I'm willing to hold that nail. So I hope that some of you vote yes to this. And with that, I'd like to call a question.
Question's been called.
Let's vote.
We'll vote on calling the question at this point.
I have a comment on discussion on.
Can't do it.
No discussion, call a question.
You got it from the lawyers.
No discussion, call a question.
That's okay. Just want to make that point known.
I don't make enough money to be buying transcripts.
He didn't buy them either. He got them from the lawyers.
Nailed.
We vote on calling the question or continuing discussion. Vote yes to call
That's
the vote yes to continue discussion. Vote no to go ahead and vote. Ready to vote.
So we're voting to call the question, which is what?
They have 48 hours.
Stop discussion.
Yes, stop discussion, is this just to call the question, or is this actually on the vote? Okay.
This is just to call the question.
Stops discussion, yeah,
Then we immediately move to the vote.
that's fine.
Start it over.
You got 2 noes and 3 yeses. Ready to vote. Vote on the motion now.
And the motion being,
Well, we haven't established the motion yet.
The motion is to instruct the interim city administrator to reschedule the executive session, and if they don't do so within 48 hours, to instruct him to file a professional board of responsibility complaint that they failed to communicate with us.
Discussion ended, we're ready to vote. Three noes, 3 yeses. No abstaining. So the motion fails. It's a tie.
okay. We're adjourned,
There
aren't we?
being no other new business, board will be adjourned. And to the board, I frankly think your discussions tonight were very appropriate and online, civil, and